All right, everybody get settled, get your drinks. Awesome. Oh my gosh, the panelists have drinks too. I don't think that was supposed to happen. I'm just kidding. It's all right, it's okay. Nobody got me one though, kind of disappointed. All right, well, thanks for staying for this breakout session. Great job, Kim. I mean, really well done, and great acceptance speeches. That was a lot of fun. So just a little bit of background on the awards. I know Kim touched on it a little bit, but we've been doing the awards since 2017, and we had the ability to partner up with HR for Health about 4 years ago, starting in 2021, to actually give out these awards and celebrate the winners. And I think this has really been the best way to do that. We did do that, did Corey mention this? We did it at a bar, and it was a little noisy, and unfortunately, it was just hard to hear the acceptance speeches, so this has worked out really well. But what we wanted to do is also really take more time with the winners to learn a little bit more about how they've scaled up, some of the challenges and successes, get to know them a little bit more. So that's what we're going to do here for the next 45 minutes, and then we've got a 90s party that we're going to have right after this, which should be fun. Trying to figure out what the attire was for a 90s party. I'm a little old to kind of figure that out. So I think it's flannel. I think grunge is would be the look, but does anybody have any outfits? A surprise, okay. All right, it's a surprise. So we're just gonna jump on here so everybody was here, right, for the awards. You probably know all the award winners. We're not gonna go through all the names again because they came up to get the awards. But what I will do is I'm gonna click to this final slide here. We did a webinar, was it about a month ago? And what we did was people registered for the webinar, like people normally do, and every registrant asked a question. And so we had, it was about 150 registrants, so we had not quite 150 questions, but close to that. And so the questions that I have here are from the webinar discussion that we had. If you scan that QR code, if you missed the webinar, we have a recording online. It was a great discussion. But what we wanted to do is answer some questions that we weren't able to answer on the webinar, or maybe dive a little bit deeper into the ones that we weren't able to touch on. So we've got a giant panel here. I think this is like the biggest panel ever. I don't think we've ever had like 7 people on a panel. So this is going to be challenging to get through all these questions that we have. But we're going to try and do our best. And then at the 90s party, you can ask them any questions that you want. So I'm going to start off with Kelly. So unfortunately, Kelly wasn't able to make the webinar. I think she came down with something. She was sick, and she was really disappointed. And she had one question that she really wanted to answer, or really a topic. And we were talking about it this morning, and she called it embracing the suck. So, the whole concept behind this, and then I'll let you start things off, is that it's really, really, really challenging scaling up a group practice. And I think she wanted to share some of the challenges, how she and the group have dealt with them. And I think just to let everybody know that this is pretty typical, that this is not easy. It's not an easy business. It's not an easy thing to do. So, Kelly, why don't you start off with, what do you mean by embracing the suck?
You stole my line. So when you first asked me to come up and do the panel for accepting the award, I was at a very interesting spot in my career and just in the trajectory of growth that we've been in. We were in the process of 3 acquisitions and a merge, and I think I was managing 2 VDRs at the time. I'm like, sure, let's go on stage and talk about how much this sucks. Because it does, and if you don't have a large team, which most emerging groups don't, there's several of you key individuals who are responsible for handling all these requests, and as you get larger and you're trying to figure out how to scale, you're like the teenager of DSOs. You're making mistakes, you're figuring it out, you're awkward at times, and you don't have the answers. So I just told Bill, I'm like, while we're celebrating the success of a lot of our groups, and this whole panel is amazing, and I'm honored to be up here, and thank you for the opportunity. But it's hard, it's very hard, and it's gonna test your grit, and it's gonna test your why, and you have to start every day with remembering why you got into this, what your goals are, and make sure you're in alignment with your leadership team so you can move it forward the way you want to.
Thanks, Kelly. Does anybody else want to share some of the challenges and maybe how you've dealt with those? Because I'm sure you're all at different points of scale, right? Some are smaller than others, some are a little bit further along in their growth strategy. But just let me start with you, Kerry.
We made a decision to build a DSO back in around 2016. So we did a roll-up, and we introduced the concept to our advisors in 16, principally our attorney and somebody who'd been a CFO for the world's largest DSO that was a client of ours at Heartland Dental, and he'd already been retired. So we started getting their advice on the hypothesis of our business plan. Then we introduced it to a focus group in April of 17, invited 25 practices to come into Sacramento. And then what we said is we wanted them to demonstrate a commitment to the management platform before we did any funding. So we signed them all up to a management services agreement with the management platform that was really the basics of the backbone of what we have today. And not only was it consulting, but it was accounting, it was HR and benefit program, it was legal, it was procurement, all of those things to see how they would respond to moving into alignment. COVID got in the way, and then working with our investment bankers and the LOIs we'd signed with this group, we moved towards funding after an initial round with many different suitors that wanted to make an investment in us. We didn't want equity, and we don't have equity today except with the doctors who started out owning 80% of the equity in our holding company. Today it's larger because we have more doctors that we've acquired since that date. So when we get to a recap in 2026, it will be a situation where probably 85 to 88% of the equity will be owned by the doctors that have already been in and will be getting in and moving forward. And their commitment is long. So we had to define exactly as we saw the rollout of the future capital events, what we knew that the equity firms would want to see in our commitment, having worked with large private equity firms that are in the space over the last 20 years, as well as large DSOs. Once we had that agreement and we were ready to close, we were ready, I'd say, for probably half of the challenges that ended up coming up. And there's not a month that goes by that something new doesn't come up. And then you just respond to it and build out the organization. I'm very grateful that as you met my wife Olivia and our team in Sacramento, really do manage the entire group of practices employees and our management team. Well, our CFO, Jeff Stacer, and I focus on the M&A activity. But being dedicated to it, trying to stay ahead of it, making sure you have staff, it takes quite a large amount of capital. And as the banker said, you want to be incredibly liquid so you've got cushion.
Thanks, Kerry. Corey.
Yeah, so, I mean, we have a lot of challenges, but the question is, what's our biggest challenge? And since we're a specialty group, we're pediatrics only, recruiting providers has been our biggest challenge. There's not a lot of pediatric dentists that want to move to St. Louis, Missouri. If you're out there, please contact me. But if we had more providers, we'd put our foot on the gas a little bit more. But we're being really intentional with the providers we do have, but recruiting's been our biggest challenge.
Anushka, what about you at Areo?
Yeah, so just like everyone else, we also have a few challenges. I think our biggest one, though, is our practice leaders. I think other groups may call them practice managers. For us, we're looking for leaders. What we find is when you're a leader, everything may not be your fault, but everything sure as hell is your responsibility. And we find that there are a lot of people out there who can't communicate, they think everything's an argument, or they can't be held accountable and they think everything's an attack. And trying to find the right fit of person who will take ownership of the practice and not point fingers when things go sideways, I think has been our biggest challenge.
Great. Juloy?
I would say maintaining culture during a high growth period is hard. I think that goes with recruiting with dentists, recruiting practice leaders, because you need to be able to maintain your culture, I think, to attract the same kind of talent that you've had. And the more that you integrate and the more that you add, I think that's harder to do.
We've got two Marks, so I'm going to go Mark from Massachusetts.
Thanks, Bill. So, in looking at it from, we're at portable dental practice, so we go to a majority of the schools in Massachusetts. But the biggest issue for us over the years has been connectivity. So a lot of the schools that we go to are brick and mortar. In our dental providers, they set up their portable equipment in a nurse's office, in a classroom, and treat these patients. In these brick and mortar locations, you really don't have connectivity. Wi-Fi is an issue because you have HIPAA compliance issues there. So, typically our providers, they are storing that information, writing that information down, and usually entering it at the end of the day into our practice management software. So huge issue with connectivity. So if anyone has any resolutions for me, please reach out to me after.
Aussie Mark?
Thanks. We probably should have designed this setup a little bit better, but anyway. I think for us, around 7 to 10 practices was the most challenging period. Not to say that there's no challenges today, and we'll be 30 by the end of the year. But really building out a small but nimble support office was priority number one. So that was getting a great CFO, getting a great marketer, and then building someone in for recruitment, because we all know that the drivers of dentistry can be often seen as fairly simple. You're driving demand and supply. So we were a small team, and I was very intentional about the types of people that I wanted to bring into the business. So that would be my recommendation, is bring, and I think somebody said it early, bring someone in with the capability, but also the passion to want to build a really great business. In terms of challenges now, we're kind of in that hockey stick of M&A. So for me, it'll be keeping the culture that we've developed from 0 to 25 to 25 to 200. And I know I'm the ambassador of that as CEO. But also personally, I think at the moment, we're at a size where I still know every practitioner, I still know each one of our partners, and I know going forward that will be a challenge. So it's been great to be here today to hear some of the ideas about staying connected and staying personal with the business as it grows.
So Mark O'Brien, you touched on something that is actually going to lead into this next question here. I'm going to jump ahead because this is one that came in through the webinar that we didn't get a chance to answer. But as a group is scaling up, you mentioned hiring the right people. From a C-suite perspective, what's the first role you would recommend filling as somebody? I'm going to ask everybody this question. Maybe you can tell us what you did, right? But what's that first role or the most critical you think when you're scaling up?
Well, the first role that I filled was a CFO, and we are a PE-backed group, and so it was important that we had really robust visibility around numbers, good data insights, so it made sense for me to go out and find a great CFO. So I did that. I was lucky enough to find somebody who'd come out of aggregations in the medical space and had scaled a business from 0 to 40 in a few years. So was used to working hard, but also understood the relationship between support office and doctors. And I think that's really important in a healthcare environment, is bringing people in that understand the uniqueness of healthcare. And then quickly after that, I got a head of operations. So again, it was me wearing lots of hats in the early days, and bringing someone in that could drive the business forward through operations was probably the most critical next role.
When did you do it? When did you know that you needed to hire?
So the CFO straight away. So as soon as we established the business, and we started with a network of 12 as the foundation acquisition. And then I'd say 2-3 months after that, we brought in operations. And we've got a very lean support office team, and it'll stay that way. So again, it's been important to bring in the right people that are happy to work hard, be engaged, but understand the journey of a scaling up company.
Juloy, how about you? What would you recommend? What was your first C-suite hire?
So head of operations, my VPs of operations, absolutely. And then I would say, as a quick second, was my recruiter. Because having a great recruiter that really loves recruiting at all levels, I think really allows you to grow very quickly. Anyone else? Anushka?
Sure. So in our experience, our growth has been very organic. We started off as clinicians. We started one practice, and then we got tired of looking at each other every day, so we added a second practice. And then we realized at the third practice, okay, we need somebody to help us. So we brought a regional manager in. And as we've grown, we're like, okay, we need more sophisticated help. So operations for us, Caitlin's been instrumental to help with that. But definitely, in our experience, it's been operations to hold the teams accountable and make sure that the strategy coming up with is being executed. There's no point in having the ideas if nobody is executing them.
Kelly, how about at Freedom?
We started off the bat with a CEO, CFO, who was originally, the general manager of the original practices that started, but understood the partner's vision for the organization, the growth trajectory that we were trying to achieve, and saw all of the talent in, the different managers we had in place. So we were able to grow together as a team by recognizing, okay, this one's specialty lies here, and then after CEO, CFO, we had ops in there, and I think he hired me as a secretary, and then we just became ops. And then after that, we went to RCM. We did that, and then after RCM, we went marketing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kerry, how about you?
Well, at Straine, it was a little different. Our consulting firm is like a fractional chief operations officer. They're in charge of everything that goes on in the field with our clients and have been, and most of them have been with us over 10, 15 years, and in some cases over 20 years. And simultaneous to that, due to the size of the credit of the initial loan, we had to have a CFO that could communicate with the accounting department to deliver on our reporting requirements to our lender. When you're borrowing over $120 million on day one and your investment banker has arranged all the financing, there's no backing up. We've been preparing financial statements way before we transacted. We had quality of earnings reports done on the group. Before we transacted, that we went out to market, we had to do an updated Q of E just to do the timing, and it's expensive, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of money. North of our legal, accounting, and planning, and banking and investment banking fees far exceeded $10 million to get it launched. So it's not for the faint at heart, and you better have a plan, and you can't afford to make a mistake unless you want to write that check.
Corey.
Sure. So, I would say yes, COO, practice manager, someone who can really look at your business from 10,000 feet up and, have good recommendations on how to streamline processes, maximize flows. And, it's funny because within our business, our Tammy Cataldo, our practice manager, we started her from the very bottom. She started in our business as scanning in scanning in medical histories, patient histories, and we worked her right up through the pipeline, and that took her many years. But she had every position possible within our business, so she knows every position. So, for me, it's training those people, getting those people to where they need to be, and then, obviously the skills that they have, maximizing them, and learning from them as well, because they probably know the business better than some of us owners.
The other Corey.
Yeah, I'm going to echo the rest of the team here. I mean, as a full-time clinician, we made a move to hire a director of operations, somebody that could be the voice of continuity for the front office team in particular. If we were to add another right now, it'd be a finance, somebody who can manage the processes of the RCM, the accounts payable, things like that. So
That sounds like operations and finance. That seems to be the general theme that we have here. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad we were able to answer that question.
Well, just one other thing for their benefit. Everybody's at a different size. We outsourced the finance department underneath our CFO. So the CFO was an employee, and then we contracted with a top 10 CPA firm for the biz ops because that couldn't wait to stand up. It's very expensive. So don't live there for longer than a couple of years, but because ultimately the size we got to, it's a 7-figure savings in your management platform at some point in time annually after you use a third-party contractor. So it's something you can't make a mistake on, otherwise the audited financial statements aren't going to come out on time, and then the lenders get nervous.
Thanks. So we've heard this has been a general theme for the past couple of years now at DSO conferences, is same-store sales growth. So maybe we can kind of run down the line, your strategy when it comes to same-store sales growth. What are you doing? Is it treatment acceptance? Is that your success path? Is it RCM? What is that one thing that you'd recommend somebody to focus on really to kind of increase that growth? Juloy, why don't we start with you?
I'm trying to think the most important. We're growing our cosmetic quite a bit in same-store sales, because in the markets that we have, it's not something that's easily accessible, and so that has been really helpful for us, and it's all cash pay, so that's really nice.
And how do you do that?
Well, you'd be surprised how many people want Botox in rural Arkansas. So we have found that has been a nice addition for us, and it gives our dentists something intellectually different to do, and they're actually really liking that. So that's like one thing that we have done that has been quite interesting, and has really expanded in a way that we weren't really expecting to go as well as it has. So that's an example.
That's great. Anushka?
So treatment acceptance, two small words for something that's a multi-layered beast. I think it starts from the beginning, right? It's the front desk. How do we get that patient to come in? We're focusing very heavily on that. We've actually implemented Patient Prism to help with that. From there, it's our doctors. We work very heavily with our doctors on diagnosis, implementing AI to help them diagnose and get that, educate the patient. And then, I think the hardest part has been having the handoffs between the doctor and the teams, and specifically the treatment coordinator, in order to sell that treatment. How do we offer the financing? But I think that's kind of our biggest focus right now, is the verbiage to get that case acceptance between the doctor and the treatment coordinator.
Great. How about you, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, we're a younger company. We have a lot of capacity to fill, so we're working on patient acquisition, and we're doing that by investing in our team. And if the team is happy and they're well educated, then the patient's going to have a good experience. So once we get those patients, then we're retaining them. So that's where our biggest focus is.
Yeah. Mark O'Brien?
It's hard to say just one thing, but I think it's important to say that we're not just chasing same-store revenue growth, but same-store EBITDA growth as well. Because I think it was said this morning that you can have phenomenal top-line growth, but your costs blow out, and all of a sudden you've got a declining business. But we often talk internally about being operational ninjas, and that means that we focus really heavily on the recurring revenues, so the recalls, the rebookings, and making sure that treatment plans are accessible and accepted. And then on the other side is, I think Corey mentioned as well, looking at patient acquisition, so making sure that we're driving the top of the funnel in terms of bringing people into the business. And then lastly, using levers like education to upskill our practitioners and change the mix from just general practice to more higher end, higher margin procedures. So we've got a strategic initiative, like a lot of DSOs globally, that I've learnt, around implantology, surgical, and orthodontics.
Mark Doherty?
Sure. So, we're really more of a concierge service, because we're delivering the services on site to our patients. So we really don't worry about no-shows, patient failures, or patients not accepting their treatment plans, because all treatment is accepted before we see these patients. I would also say for us, where our focus is more prevention-based care, and with that, in implementing things like SDF, silver diamine fluoride, sealants, fluorides, our cost of care is lower. So we're not looking at big expenses on our end, and that's alluring to dental providers. That's especially alluring because, we hear so much about burnout these days, and as dental providers, and I'm an endodontist, so I'm seeing the death of the tooth when I treat patients in my practice. But, with the burnout and, with the workforce shortages, doing simpler procedures is easier, quite frankly.
Thanks. Kelly?
Sure. So with the merge being so recent for us, we doubled in size and we doubled in the size of providers, but the group that we merged with had a lot of specialties, like super specialties, that we hadn't had access to before. So we spent a lot of time and energy in educating the team on resources that they have available, as well as the providers, doing meet and greets and saying, if you need to refer to this specialty for this type of situation, now you have all of these in-network options where we're all a big group. So we've done a lot of, let's say hi to our new family and get everybody cross-referral into the same network.
Great. Kerry?
As Mark said, prevention is key. Our focus is on access to care. With over 140,000, 50,000 patients of record, we need to make sure we have providers to take care of them. And for every 600 patients, you need a full-time hygienist. For every 12 to 1,500 patients, you need a full-time doctor. So if you've got 3,000 active patients, you've got one doctor, one hygienist, you have a problem because you're not meeting the clinical needs of your patients. That's the first thing to solve, access to care. So then we look at how do we expand the provider team within the facility. Most people want to work 8 to 5, so that's where it's at. It's not the theory of going 7 to 7 anymore because the cost of daycare is too expensive at 5. So what we have to do is look at the available operatories, fill them up 4 days a week, and then when that practice is ready, we go to a 5th, and in some cases, a 6th day a week. That isn't to the existing employees, but today there's a lot of people that want to work part-time, odd shifts, and Friday and Saturday opens up the door for people that can't afford to make their life work to pick up another day or 2 a week on top of their 4-day gig. So that's step 1, is increasing patient visits. Step 2 is increasing the revenue per patient visit. Most of our practices are very, very sizable to begin with, and with the exception of our all-on-X case practices and our pediatric practices, most of them are GP practices. And you're talking about fluoride. You're talking about the CDC here in Atlanta saying 74% of Americans my age have periodontal disease, 47% of people age 40. Well, when you start to look at the quantity of 4910s that you built out in the last 6 months divided by 2, there's your people count, and compare that to the sum of that number to the 1110s you've done in the last 6 months, and you're gonna see what percentage of your patients are in perio maintenance. That's more important as a consultant to me than anything else because it's a wellness path. And when you see practices whose statistic is 5%, 10%, 15%, then you have to look at your clinical standards that you're managing on behalf of the dentists you have working for you. And it just goes out from there. And that increases the revenue per patient visit. So those are the 2 ways to increase same-store sales. Patient visits, revenue per patient visit, and then collect it. Make sure you don't finance any copayment. Nobody wants to be owed money. As Bill always says on the golf course, when you lose, fast pay makes fast friends. And when somebody walks out of your practice not scheduling, not paying their copayment, you're going to waste overhead, which is just going to create a disappointment and conflict between you and your patients. So there's a lot of opportunities to focus on before you need to get too sophisticated. But in the end, when you look at a patient that's in hygiene, you should expect for bread and butter dentistry, and I've got clients in all these states that we've worked with, not including Australia, but the average revenue per patient and hygiene as an adult is $1,200 to $1,300 a year. You get to 1,500 patients in hygiene, you should be seeing $1.8 to $2 million. Pediatric runs at about $750 to $850, depending on their surgical inclination. But if you don't understand the business that you're leading, there's some opportunities that are really opportunities that will give you hope for the future.
Great, thank you. All right, do we have vendors out there? Can I see a show of hands for the vendors in the audience? Okay. It's about half and half. Yeah, okay, so this one's for you too. So let's kind of run down the line here. Your strategy to product selection, vendor selection, and what a partnership means to you. I know that's kind of a lot rolled up into one, but you can kind of, answer that any way you'd like. Start with Aussie Mark.
We don't have a standardized product range. We very much live by the mandate that the clinicians make those decisions, which can be problematic. With a background in retail, I've always been used to working with core ranges and having a good, better, best kind of product choice. But what we have been able to do is standardize some of the out-of-mouth products like gloves and cotton wool, those sorts of things, that don't really have an emotional connection with clinicians. But the vendors that we work with closely are the ones that add value to our organisation outside of just offering us price. And price is obviously important, but we want our vendors to come to us, provide insights into the industry, insights into what categories are growing, benchmark us against others, and finally support learning and development, which is one of our key strategic pillars. So that's what I say to all our vendors: support us, support our growth, and we work together in a partnership. It can't be a one-way street. And we've been lucky to have some great partners on board to support us.
I'll ask Kerry this question. I'll add something else to it. And do you use a procurement platform?
We do use a procurement platform. It's a software platform that allows for all of our doctors to take their online accounts, link it. You know, the doctors have a unique perspective of what they want to use to deliver their service. I use another golfing analogy. If you're a golfer, come see me. We'll talk about it all night long. But if you want to make it on the PGA Tour and you're used to hitting a certain ball in a club, the sure way to get off the tour is to change equipment. And doctors become very comfortable, right, Corey? I mean, you do. And so all we do is create a way for them to buy it. And for most of what they want to buy, they can order it through one of the major dental supply companies, and we have formularies with our chosen one that's tied to the software platform, although at the same time, and it keeps everybody honest, there's other sources for the product that we're linked to. Certainly our orthodontic, our implant, whatever else I'm thinking about that would be unique. We have specially negotiated prices, and we work with that, and they too have ways to buy them, but it's all managed, and we can typically drive down the overhead, and our doctors have a stake in the game. Again, they're going to own close to 88% of the company. So this is all hitting the bottom line that they're participating in. And for our, we converted to a DPO model early last year because that was the way the market was going. And in the joint venture sub-DSO partnership, the doctors have a stake in their share of the EBITDA before they capitalize on that and monetize that at our next capital event. So everybody's got a chance to win, and it makes it real easy, too, for the dental assistants just to put the product in, and then the software program guides them in the direction.
Okay. Kelly, do you have a formulary?
Yes.
Okay, you do.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about that process of determining, you know, the products, and do you have a clinical director board?
Okay.
What does that look like?
So one of the things I realize is that is not my specialty. So I have Dawn, who's our chief compliance officer back there, and she is the best coupon cutter, bargain hunter, Black Friday shopper. So we stick her on the vendors for procurement platform, and she does amazing cost savings. She dropped our professional supplies over 5% in less than 12 months, just by teaming up with some really awesome vendors. But the one thing I can say is as a, I guess, consumer or business partner, know your customers. Please do some research. Reach out. Talk to us about what we need. Don't be just the sales pitch. Any of the business partners that we've entered into with our vendors, they got to know us as people first. And they got to understand what we were missing in the industry and what we needed for our growth. And they were able to supply solutions to things that weren't even in their wheelhouse, but just because they knew better because they'd been in the industry for so long. So get to know us as people, you know, and then when it's time, we'll reach out to you for a good sales solution. And they're usually the ones we go with because we trust your information and your integrity as just a business colleague and as an authority in the industry. But as soon as you can, grab somebody who's going to be your procurement manager because they will save you the most amount of money you can find.
Mark Doherty.
Sure, to kind of echo what Kelly has said here, you know, I think for us it's all about the relationships. It's all about the people. It's about the partnerships. And, you know, when we're investing with a vendor, it's more about we're investing with that person or who they stand for. And certainly we want a product that matches well with our practice. But, you know, we want to know, okay, how long have you been with this business for? What does your future look like? How long do you expect to be with this business? Because, again, we're investing in that person. And, you know, sometimes it can be the matter of really sink or swim for our practice. So, you know, there's a lot held there. I would also say that, you know, in addition to, you know, having that relationship, that partnership, you know, what is your support like? What is your response time like? If an issue happens with our practice and we're down, you know, we can't afford downtime. We need that uptime. So, you know, if we're reaching out to you, are responding, you know, in a timely manner. You know, the coaching, the training, what does that look like? You know, do you make sure that all our staff members are up to snuff with how your systems work? I think those are the big things on our end, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Juloy, what's the best way for a vendor to connect with you or somebody on your team? How do you like to be contacted? And then what's the process of, you know, evaluating product?
So on our websites, like we have our contact information posted. I'm very comfortable with people contacting me, but I would say if you're contact to the right person. So if you're a recruiting firm, contact my recruiter. Like, don't come through me because I'm the CEO, because that's all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna refer you to the subject matter expert. And it's gonna annoy me that you didn't even do the research. I mean, it will. I'll just be like, well, it's available on the website. So I would say, respect our time and be responsive, because if you've got a great product and you've got a great way to connect, we're gonna go with you. We're gonna work with you. We're gonna be interested in hearing what you have to say. So I would say that would be my thought.
Great. And this one's for Anushka and Corey. You're both clinicians, so maybe we talk a little bit about the clinical product selection process. Since you're both clinicians, I mean, are you solely making that decision, or are you making that, with the team? How does that work? Anushka, we can start with you.
Yeah, so from our perspective, because we're clinicians, we have a little bit of an unfair advantage. We do have a formulary. We select what's on there. Most of our doctors are younger doctors, and they're kind of looking to us for guidance. So the dental school may tell them, ask for X, Y, Z, but really they don't know what's out there. So we kind of make that decision. As an example, we use ZimVie. Dr. Raj is probably the best implant dentist I've ever met. He specifically found ZimVie. He works with them, and all of our doctors are on ZimVie now. That's just one of the examples of the things that we've decided to do.
Corey?
Yeah, I mean, what Kerry said, clinicians, we try to give the autonomy. We also have a formulary. We try to guide the providers to use those materials, but we also know what's comfortable in our hands as well. And so the other thing I would say as far as relationships with the vendors is we're looking for somebody who can provide us a solution, not a fad. If you come to us with a solution, we're more likely to work with you. It's a partnership, right? So partnerships are about happiness both ways. And so if you make us happy, we'll make you happy, and we'll also provide revenue for your organization.
Awesome. We have about 8 minutes left and 7 panelists, so this might be the last question. So why don't we try and make this a wrap up? Where do you see yourselves as an organization this time next year? So we're just going to ask 1 year in the future. What's kind of that plan look like? Where do you think you'll be? And Kerry, we'll start with you.
We're rapidly entering LOIs, letter of intents, for acquisitions of practices that are interested in not only just getting cash up front, which the amount of cash we pay up front is pretty much what you'd sell to another dentist for, or maybe just a tad less than you'd get from a major DSO, but they're not going to give you the roll-in equity into our whole co like we are. So if you're looking at a 7.5x, and we're going to give you 3.5 in cash for there, we have very interested parties. We had an LOI signed today at noon. Just got word on a $24 million group that's coming on board with us today when I talked to the owner. So there's so much interest in a pathway to provide stability to operations and support to improve quality of life, but also capitalize on the equity play when we go to future recaps. So where I see us next year is around 150 to 180 practices. Revenue should be approaching 350 to 400 million. Think that the EBITDA's just use a standard 20%. And then we'll be moving onto our pathway of recap, although it's not intended to be Q2 until Q2 of 2026. We'll be at a healthcare summit in San Francisco in January of 25 with our investment banker, starting to introduce who we are to that opportunity. The key between now and then is just really vet out the acquisition targets. We can't be speaking a different language. So they already have to be operating in a way that there's leadership, there's an org chart, there's department leaders, there's accountability, and that's a natural fit into this migration into Straine, and that's what we're looking for in addition to our pipeline of clients we work with. So we are very intentional. We don't intend on selling off our leadership of our platform to anybody. We have tremendous faith in our leaders that Livia and I have put together, and our doctors in the field who have long-term commitments. And for those that know, as you're building acquisitions, minimum commitment today is 5 years. And if you really want them to stay longer and their associates, you have to think of the conventions that you can offer for equity participation, whether they're profits, interest, stock, buy-in, or whatever. Meet with great legal counsel like Brian's firm, and you'll be on a good path.
Excellent, thanks. Corey?
Man, I wish I would have gone first. Mine's not as complicated. So this time next year, I mean, we plan to have 9 providers in our 6 locations, possibly adding another specialty, and just keep building our infrastructure that drives our vision and our passion.
What's that specialty that you'd add?
Possibly oral surgery.
Oh, okay. All right. Anushka?
So we're just being very opportunistic over the next year. We're looking at de novo sites, looking at acquisitions as well, but really focusing heavily on same-store growth. I think, you know, one of the things we're spending a lot of time on is, as Dr. Raj coined, creating our 10X dentists who are, you know, super GPs who can do the procedures we need them to do, and filling our ops. I think we have a revenue per op goal that we haven't yet met, so we're just continuing to focus on that.
Thank you.
So by mid-October, we'll be at 22 practices. We expect to be at 35 by the end of next year, doing a recap. Additionally, adding in 9 providers within our existing locations for same-store growth, because our volume is growing to that degree that we were going to need them. And then I would say we will have our associate dental program for buy-in completely launched by the end of this year, so they can buy in next year.
Are you staying in the same states you're in now, or looking to move?
Sorry, so and moving into 3 states, 3 additional states.
Great. Okay. Kelly?
Well, if we don't already have it, largest market share in Delaware, but we have 3 counties, so that's kind of a low pull. But I would say we were going to be better than we are today. You know, and we have M&A stuff on the horizon, we have LOIs on the horizon, we have de novo, and everybody's got sights on, you know, how we're going to get larger and how we're going to get better. I just want to be better than we are today. We stub our toe in a lot and we learn a lot, and, you know, failure teaches us a lot of really good lessons about how to do this better. We're going to run a tighter ship, a more efficient ship, a more profitable ship, and I'm excited to see what that comes with. So I just want us to be better than we are right now, and I think we can absolutely do that.
And I think you mentioned, or John mentioned, when he accepted the award, that you had that big merger in June, right? Was it June?
It was final 5/31, so
Okay,
we're
so
just...
that's still going on, right?
Yeah.
That's not...
It's super fun. It's super fun. We can talk about that offline.
Does that tie into the first question that I asked?
About
yeah.
yes,
Okay.
embracing the suck, yes.
Thanks, Kelly. Mark Doherty.
Sure. So, you know, it's really meeting, especially in Massachusetts and the populations that we serve, is meeting that demand of care. And, you know, it's so funny because social media is such a great tool for advertising and marketing. But for us, it's like word of mouth has still been the foundation of our success. And, you know, we really deal with a lot of school nursing groups and city councilmen and mayors. And, you know, we work with state programs. And, you know, it's interesting because what we're starting to see now is things like Massachusetts colleges reaching out to us for our services, is more state programs. So, you know, the future, it looks pretty awesome. And, you know, we're on that road to see what success looks like for us.
Excellent. Mark O'Brien.
Well, excitedly, in the next few weeks, we'll be entering the Western Australia market. And that'll make us truly a national player in Australia. It's also publicly known that our PE sponsors have taken a large stake in a listed dental business in Australia, which could potentially mean that we go from 20 or 25 odd practices to 160 in the next 12 months. So that's a big elephant to swallow. And there's no guarantees it will happen. But you know, I think consistent with the rest of the panel as well is just continuously being the best at what you do and keeping the culture that we've developed and keeping true to our values and our integrity. It's really hard to measure that sometimes, but that's critical as any organisation scales, is to keep that personal feel and not to become the big fat corporate that doesn't listen to the people that are actually doing the work.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We finished up with like 20 seconds to go. Awesome. So congratulations, everybody, to the teams here, and great job, panelists. I mean, really, really nice job. great insights. So we've got a QR code up here for the folks that think they could be an emerging group in 2025. You can scan that QR code. We'll send you an application. You can find Kim or I at the 90s party tonight and ask us. We can send it out to you. Or you can get more information on the groupdentistrynow.com website. But this is an honor for us to be able to present these awards and really just get to know everybody and just find out more about your journey. I mean, it is not easy, as Kelly alluded to, and you should all be really, really proud of yourselves. I mean, it's exciting to talk about this. And so I think Gary is going to come up and talk about the 90s party that we have coming up in a couple of minutes, maybe? Because I don't know anything about it, except it's a 90s party and I think we're supposed to wear flannel.
I will be talking about the
You will
90s
be.
party.
I think we are. Thank you. Oh, he's got his outfit on too.